Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, the dreaded DM, DBJ, and I am surrounded by the brilliant, the immortal, the this show would not exist. Um, uh, I guess you could call him the dreaded the dreaded members of the outer community that make me look smart. Because the reason why I say that is because this week we're talking about unreliable narrators, like point of view characters, and the dreaded info dump. A bit of a meta type of discussion this week, more so than deep diving into the settings of some of our favorite role playing games, such as Dungeons and Dragons and others. I'm a sci-fi fan myself, but part of our meta discussions sometimes lead us to down different pathways. Sometimes we end up touching upon history, or we'll touch upon like gaming mechanics and that kind of thing. Uh, you know, Sometimes it opens up an avenue. And there was a recent, sorry, I'm just preambling here just a little bit. Um, a video released just yesterday from Tabletop Terrors, one of my favorite people. Both I know them and I love their content as well. And they released a video about like not having any inspiration. And um, one of a personal challenge of mine, what for this channel, was to put myself in a position where I would be completely uncomfortable. Thanks, Cam. Cam's like the dreaded info dump. Bob Marley running a homebrew world. He's a bit too excited about. Yeah. Oh man. Who shot the paladin? um. Yeah, shot the paladin, but did not shoot the barbarian. The um. The idea that we can come to the table like unprepared. Maybe we don't feel like it. Maybe we were uninspired. You've got like a 3 to 4 hour session in front of you, and you're like uncertain about it, or you're sitting down with your pen and paper, or your stylus, or whatever document writing implement you use to record your things. Maybe you've got a wiki page or something, and you're just not inspired. And part of my challenge for doing this show, and for we're heading towards 3 years straight now, 5 days a week, is this idea that running out of material. Is it possible to run out of role-playing game material? I don't think so. Is it possible to run short on good ideas and inspiration? I feel like we tend to sell ourselves short a little bit, and that we're much better than we think we are. It was a part of a comment I posted for after watching the video for Tabletop Terrors. Like, I think we sell ourselves short when it comes to our own creativity, our own energies, our own desires for things, and we can become our own worst enemy. So it's just a message out there that, like, if you're part of the show, or you're someone new who just captured the show or something, that I show up unprepared on purpose. I'm getting up at 5:30 in the morning, so I'm not even awake yet. My mind's not even going yet. So that's not a humble brag. That's just basically like, hey, listen. Sometimes you're just not feeling it, and there is a way for us to break past that. And if this is a community to just become inspired, even just a little bit, then I hope you're part of that. Yeah, Dead Man said, I shot the paladin. Yeah, but I did not shoot the cleric there. I'm gonna get tagged for that too. Anyway, today is World Building Wednesday. And for those who do not know, World Building Wednesday is where we take come on, kitty. We take our subject, whatever subject it is we've been talking about all week. We hit hump day, and we attempt to create a setting where whatever subject matter we're talking about shapes the world. And while we could decide to engage in one specified particular setting, I think we can stretch this out to like 3 or 4 settings. What I mean by that is we've been talking about like point of view and unreliable narrators. And I have a feeling that uh, some of us might not want it to be one specific setting because this is such a meta style of storytelling. But I think we could use this for as an overlay or a conceptual idea for a number of different settings. Yeah. Uh, yeah, Rickard's like, why would you not shoot the cleric? Now the paladin's probably resurrected. He got both of them after you. Yeah. 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 Mo resurrection, mo problems. It's always a problem when you're a lich dealing in ancient, demon summoning texts on the corner. You got to watch out for those paladins and clerics. Yeah. Yeah. Always take out the healer first. Yeah. That's another meta thing that might be a week long thing. I'm not going to go down that path. I'm not even going to open up that door yet. All right, so um, point of view and unreliable narrators. Now I'm going to do this very, very generally, so that we can talk. We can jump into our world building. Sorry. One of the things about a point of view story, and the thing is that we use point of view all the time. Ask any NPC about some piece of information, and guess what? They're going to give that information to you as well, their point of view. And some of that information could be very, unreliable because of whatever your measurement is for their reliable or unreliable nature, right? The NPC could be a noble or a merchant or a shipwright, or that NPC could be, a dead spirit, or speaking to the dead, or talking to plants or animals or something. The NPC could be a cutthroat or a criminal or a pickpocket, or so they're going to color those things based on their own perception. So we use point of view all the time when speaking to NPCs. Now, going further into it, when it comes to our world, we've all seen this happen in the opening credits to some of our favorite like medieval stories, where you do this, you're doing the eagle eye and you're sweeping through and there's some narrator talking about it. The movie 300 comes to mind. The entirety of the movie 300 is a narration. If you remember when the 300 began, there's a narrator voicing over it, and you end up realizing it's one of the Spartan soldiers with one eye, having gone back to explain the battle that the 300 have gone through. So in many ways, you could say that the whole movie 300 didn't really happen the way it did. It was described to engender the passion of a vast army to fight off the Persians, right? And so, how we color our things really depends on how other people might perceive it as well. Cameron says, should unreliable narrators be described as such? Some players think everything NPCs say is gospel. That is very true. Yeah. Tesla says 300 is a military recruitment video. It sure is. Yes, and then Leonidas stalked by the wolf. You know what I mean? Like the whole thing, and you've got like giants and man eaters and assassins and all that, and it's like if you really think about it, right? As convincing as that one Spartan soldier was, did it really happen that way? I mean, did it really happen that way? Now, in it, historically, no, it didn't, right? But in the movie, our mind, they're showing us the visual of what our minds are imagining when that Spartan soldier is describing what the hell they're going through, right? So yeah, eventually your mind is starting to be like, oh, maybe there are like 20-foot giants with no arms and blades coming out of where they should be, and heads getting popped off and moving in slow motion because that's just so cool, right? I mean, maybe, you know. Rickard says urban fantasy settings works really well for unreliable narrator setting info. I agree with you there. You have enough info that is not unreliable, given the setting is our modern world, plus random fantasy stuff. So the players already have things to buy into, right? And now, okay, one trap we don't want to fall into, and I'm probably guilty of this because of the way I'm describing things as the unreliable narrator of the show, is that something that's unreliable doesn't need to be like evil or a gotcha or a trap or something, right? If when taking Rickard's idea of like modern fantasy or urban fantasy, where there's like automobiles and cars and police, but there's also mystic elements hanging around the corner. When someone describes something as a vampire, the NPC doesn't mean to lie about anything. They just know from their own modern context, well, I saw someone getting attacked in an alleyway and someone was biting their throat. It seems like a vampire to me, when it might be something vampiric or vampire-like, or maybe not even at all. It could be like a werewolf or a ghost or a demon or anything like that. But their first impression was, of course, with them beating feet and getting the hell out of there, is, oh, I saw someone being attacked in an alleyway by a vampire, and please don't tell anyone that I said this because they're going to think I'm crazy, right? So, it's all about perception and everything. Lurker, what's going on? Now, Rickard says the problem with point of view and unreliable narration is that the game is streamlined to be important. To be important scenes. You don't have a whole session of fact checking all the info dumping the DM has given the players. Yeah, that's see, and Cam, you brought this up too, where normally, just because of the way role-playing games are structured, that if I describe to you, let's get away from even the NPCs, right? If I describe to you a room, the default is everything I tell you is true and honest, right? Oh, you enter into the chamber, into the ancient chamber, and it looks like the door has been shut, and it's everything inside has never been touched in 1,000 years, and I describe to you a bed and a desk and an armoire, and the PCs are like, oh, okay, I guess there's a desk and and a bed and an armoire, as opposed to going, something doesn't seem right about this, and so yeah, you're absolutely right, where games are almost designed to accept that if I am the dungeon master, everything I say is true and forthright and acceptable to what is presented before you. Now, I will say that players will default to whatever the game master says is true. But remember, the game master, and maybe this has fallen away, the game master isn't necessarily info dumping. The game master is describing the world through the eyes of the player characters, right? So if your player character cannot see the secret door behind the armoire, then it won't be described. If your character can't see over the horizon, you're not going to see those objects. If your character can't see inside the pockets of those mischievous goblins, then you're not going to see it. So it behooves the players sometimes to question the world. Now, the reason why that's fallen away is because way back in, white box, red box, purple box Dungeons and Dragons, BX system and whatnot, was this idea of the 10-foot pole, where players spend hours and hours and hours walking down hallways because the game master is specifically not describing the world they're describing the world in a manner to hide the things in it, as opposed to describing the world from the point of view of the characters. And so, uh, point of view and unreliable information actually can work in the player's benefit. So let me give you an example. Um, drunken fighter walks out of bar, okay, at a tavern, begins to get surrounded by thugs. Now, one description could be, you stumble out into the dark alley, and bandits seep out of the shadows and surround you. Your drunkenness preventing you from seeing, the dangers around you. Maybe that character's second level, third level, maybe. When they start hitting seventh or eighth level, maybe describe it as you drunkenly stumble out of the tavern. But even before the first foot, you hear the first footsteps, or you see the first shadow fall across your pathway, you understand that, yeah, this is an ambush. But the way they talk, maybe even their smell, something about them tells you that even unarmed, you could take these guys in a minute, right? So you're describing the world in a manner through the PC's eyes rather than the world as a fact. Because in a modern context, me surrounded by a bunch of criminals is going to think differently than, say, some special forces officer or Navy SEAL surrounded by those same said individuals, right? They're going to look at it differently. They're like, all right, you see, I can sense two people behind me. There's a third person I can't see, but they're probably a lookout. Their mind is already registering things where I'm panicked, right? I'm like, oh shit, like if I don't give up my stuff, I'm a dead man. Yeah, Lurker says, gamers social contracting, it can lead to some tense moments. Yeah, if you well, session zero, and remember, session zero doesn't have to be the very first session. Session zero is, hey guys, listen. As we start to go into our world building here, as I segue into that, hey guys, listen. I'm going to describe things to you. There may be NPCs and elements in the world which are described from what you're seeing, but they may not be your face value. So, any type of noir detective investigation story tends to have a lot of this, right? If you're playing Call of Cthulhu for any moment, or you're playing Dungeons and Dragons and it's Ravenloft, or it's like, let's say you wanted to run an investigative style of gaming, then that means pretty much the game master, dungeon master, is going to offer information that has limited or altered factual evidence to it. Let's see. Cameron says, should these alternative styles be explained to the table, or should it be a team? Be a team as they go along. Um, well, how to explain this? I wouldn't do it unless you have either players that are like, look, throw anything at me, I don't care what it is. Some people like me, I'm that kind of person. Like, hey, let's play a comedy game and it's beer and pretzels, okay. And then someone else is like, you know what? Let's play a super serious game. I'm all for it. So I'm open to surprises. Some players are not. Some players are like, listen, I have a character sheet in front of me. I need to know that the rules are not going to change on me, and I need to know that if you describe things to me, that you're not fooling me on a thing. But Dungeons and Dragons has built-in unreliable narration, right? Because there are many creatures that have the trait. It is undistinguishable from the environment until it starts to move. So in those cases, doppelgangers and mimics and a bunch of other like camouflage style creatures are literally designed to not be described unless the player characters investigate. Now, there isn't even, if you think about it, there really isn't even a rule that says if you poke it with a 10-foot pole, you notice the mimic. But the implication is, if the players do investigate. So let's get into some of our world building and our point of view / unreliable narration, where point of view doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong. It just means it's from the point of view of someone else. Joseph Keenan mentions in in the chat who doesn't get a chance to pop in live a lot, but mentions that historically there was a period of time where literally the nobles and the leadership in the world changed on a monthly basis due to like assassination and disease and death and coups and all that kind of stuff. And so it may not be that the information a player's getting is wrong. It could just be that it's never up to date. So a portion of your world might be like um, political upheaval, because I was going to talk about something political, economic, maybe historical, or elemental. These things can affect your world, and maybe, just maybe, part of your world is the type of place where it's always different. If you leave for a week and come back, things are always different. Um, so Rickard says, if you take the example of the vampire attack, right, which I mentioned before about someone turns the corner, sees an innocent person being attacked by a vampire, says if you haven't pointed out that the info is unreliable, like I think I saw a vampire, but I'm not sure. Okay, I hear you. And you make it a werewolf. Now, every other time you give any info, it will be questioned, and the fact checked, because you as the DM have lied to the players once already. That's one of the reasons why it faded away, because in the old BX, the modules were kind of written that way, where you were supposed to read the box text, and it wasn't written in an unreliable fashion, right? Like you're saying, if the NPC says, you know what, I don't know, or I think I saw a vampire, but I'm not sure, or you know, that's the first thing that came to mind, man. Like a vampire. I mean, I've never really seen a vampire in real life, but if I imagined it to be like one, but maybe it was something else, right? Or if you don't leave the doorway open in your descriptions, whether you're giving information through NPCs, or the PCs are looking around a room, or they come into a brand new city, and they're unsure of something, you might want to leave a few doorways open. I guess you could foreshadow the unreliableness. Like, yeah, you're speaking to a cutthroat who's like, I don't know, scratching his arm or rubbing his nose because there's a popular purple drug that's like powder dripping from his nose, and sending clearly that the person thinks they're giving you proper information, but really what they're looking for is a payday. And you could even, now mind you, Rickard, I'm not against just being meta about it, right? The rogue goes to speak to someone in a dark alley, and then you, as the game master, says directly to the player, you say directly to them, "Hey, rogue, this person is unreliable." Right? The NPC is like, "Oh, I'm certain it was a vampire. Of course it was. Hey, you promised me some a couple of coins, right?" And then you tell the player, not the character, but the player, "Listen, you're a fifth level rogue, dude. You're in your heart of hearts, this information might not be the most reliable." Right? Let them know that. If when the paladin goes to goes up the steps to the local church and wants to speak to one of the people, parishioners there, and one of the parishioners starts talking, you can tell the paladin, like, "Hey, listen, um, they seemed convinced of their information, but you're an adventurer, and that they're not saying a thing quite right." Hey, oh, Ponce de Leon. I'm just messing with you, dude. There, James Lundell. What's going on there, man? Cameron says, like, newspapers, um, unreliable as heck. Yeah, just need enough tech for a printing press or enough magic to have auto writing pens or something. You know what? What is it? Like tabloid newspaper style information and stuff is one of those things that's unreliable, and notably so. They actually get off on it. Yeah. Hey, I'm messing with shit. Yeah. But good to have you here. All right. Lurker says, that's why a long running game group is so great. You get comfortable and learn to trust that no matter where the story goes, they understand you're not out to screw them over. See, that's the other thing too, right? It's you don't want to uh, you don't want everything that's unreliable to screw the players over. Maybe it's something that's unreliable actually works out in their benefit, right? Like, um, you know, I'm not certain, but I think I have a map that points to treasure. And when the PCs get there, they're like, no, this isn't just one treasure chest; it's like three of them. It all depends, right? Or someone says, the PCs are in a city of thieves and they need to find a healer, and someone says, "Well, I think I know someone. They are, they're a local veterinarian or something." And the PCs roll their eyes like, "Oh my goodness, do we really want to go to this healer?" And when they get there, despite the fact that they actually might be a veterinarian, they might be an expertly skilled healer, right? And so they end up finding something that's even better, or they trust unreliable information that leads them to somebody who is far more reliable in getting them to where they need to go. Tesla puts in. Thank you very much, Tesla. The year of the six emperors. The year of the six emperors was the year 238 A.D., during which six people were recognized as emperors of Rome. Yeah, yeah, and I mean, why couldn't we design a world where, listen, who's the leader? I don't know. Remember last week with our random tables. Who's in control now? Let's see. Let's randomly roll. It is the Duchess of so and so, and also she's married to her cousin. Roll again. Who's to say that might not change at the very day that the PCs get there, right? It things might be unreliable and or chaotic, right? One doesn't necessarily need to lean into the other, but it very much could be, especially if there's a lot of political upheaval with, like I said, assassinations, plagues, and starvation have a lot to do with this as well. There's a lot of political leaders that were like, leading countries. They thought they'd lead forever, and they're busy bragging about, their godhood, and then what is it, 3 years later, boom, died from a plague. Oh well, next person steps up, the idiot cousin, and everyone rolls their eyes and they're like, oh my goodness, here we go again. you know um like Rickard is saying, quote, your character has seen people on the glowing fun powder before, though for all you know the information might be as reliable as if the NPC saw the moon coming down to eat the victim alive. Yeah, I mean, right, there might be. That's a perfect example, right? Hey, you give the players the at the same time you're giving the players this concrete, air quote, concrete information, you're also giving them information that says, listen, this isn't concrete information. Drug addiction, psychological issues, obsession or fanaticism, like political obsession or fanaticism to one side or another. Duty is another thing. That Knights Order or Paladins are going to color their interaction with you based on their duty or honor or devotion, their oath to whatever they partake. Same thing with like security guards or something of that nature. Religious individuals are going to do that. So uh, if you color that, it's pretty cool. Gaming, hey, gaming as usual. Hi there, thank you. Says I like giving one PC reliable info that's outlandish, but the others believable, unreliable info, and let them try to figure it out for fun. Yeah, sometimes the meta part of us talking about unreliable narration is that we we know that we default to the information we know is reliable, right? So an example would be that let's go with the classic troll, right? Our reliable information from role playing games for so long as a player is that a troll stops healing if you burn it or throw acid on it, right? That is our default because we've seen it enough times. So when a random NPC describes something as a troll, we're like, okay, our mind goes to, all right, what's the stat block? We've encountered these things before. You have to burn it. You cut off its arm. It's going to grow back into like two of them or something like that, or the arm's going to grow back. So we know this to be a truism. And so that so-called unreliable information sometimes happens because we ourselves interpret it like, oh, I know what this is about. We're filling in the gaps, right? And that can be pretty fun, especially when someone says something completely outlandish and the player characters. I did this before where I talked about a black dragon, and I said something like, oh, there was a black dragon up in the mountains, and the people were talking about the black dragon, and and when the PCs got there, the victims had a lot of part of the village was burned down, and they had these burn marks. The players assumed that it was a red dragon, right? I'm sorry, the players assumed it was a black dragon, but there were burns, and they were like, "Oh, those burns are from acid," and the village was on fire, and they were like, maybe somebody knocked over a lantern or something. So they assumed it was a black dragon because the NPCs were saying it was a black dragon, it was a black dragon, it was a black dragon, and they assumed, okay, acid, because the meta part of it is we know what the monster manual is. And then when they went to fight it, it was a red dragon that just happened to be covered by soot. Now that was me being an a-hole because I was like, gotcha, don't do that. Please don't do that. But my point was, I did it on purpose because I played with their expectations, right? And that was the thing. Gaming as usual says, had 3 PCs roll perception in a field once. One rolled a 4, told him he's seen a cloud moving fast in the sky. Then one of the others rolled at 18, and I told them it was a sheep flying at them. They didn't believe it until it hit them. They knew a giant was nearby and and like scaring off travelers. I hope that sheep wasn't thrown through the air. But yes, let's see. What are the chances of, let's see, a giant sheep or a cloud? What are the chances I would see that in a clear blue sky? Yeah. See, that's where my mind went, right? As a game master, like, yeah, probably a big old sheep getting thrown through the air, But as the people playing the game, what do we default to? That's not a sheep. That's someone lying. It's probably a cloud, right? And that makes a lot of sense too. Now, so political upheaval is one of these things where the information the PCs have, or when they left the city, or when they talk to someone, that the information politically hasn't spread far and wide enough for any one person to keep up. So when they ask someone, hey, who's in charge now? And they go, well, it used to be the Council of 7, but I heard rumors that 3 of them were assassinated, and they're the young daughter of one of the councils trying to take over, but I'm not really certain. It's a good way. Now there's also economic, right? Economic unreliableness is something akin to like here in the States with the oil rush, the gold rush, where there was a television show called Deadwood. There was another television show called during the age of piracy called Black Sails. There was a Vikings on the History Channel show is a good example of this, as well as there was a 3 or 4 part show called Klondike about the gold rush, and that is economically. And I don't mean, doing spreadsheet economics, but I'm saying like something is valuable for people to go somewhere, and the growth is outpacing your knowledge of the area, right? So like if you ever watch the show Deadwood, it's a Western show that's, of course it's no longer airs, but each episode of that show, the city kept getting bigger and larger, and property was changing hands, and more people were there. It was growing and changing and shifting. In the television show Vikings, you could leave for a month, come back, and certain people were dead. So some were like horribly scarred or injured. Others went on a vision quest, and you're just like, wow, just, the people there, of course, are used to it. But if you're a PC and you arrive, leave, and come back again, things might just change quite a bit. Um, let's see. Cameron says, I realize now that I've done a subversion of the unreliable narrator. I wrote up a conspiracy group in a town that is correct about the conspiracy they're into. Yeah, like a conspiracy theorist group, right? That's a perfect example where the town is operating normal. The minority of people who seem a little bit like cuckoo, they're like, no, there's a conspiracy with people who have taken over. They're shape changers, and their bodies have been stolen. And there's people, there are people hiding in the shadows. And what do the PCs do? The PCs are like, yeah, I don't believe what they're saying. But maybe the conspiracy theorists are right about the thing, especially if they are the minority of the group, right? It's the homeless person wandering around stark raving mad until you find out that no, they're not stark raving mad. They have been driven to insanity because no one believes the things that they're seeing or happening around them. Yep. Uh, Yep. Here, gaming as usual says could be gangs um, fighting for control in a town, changing hands that way. Oh hell yeah! And then you could throw in some like like street style militia, or the heavy hand of law enforcement comes in and starts doing like street sweeps, rounding up criminals and innocents in these sweeping measures. And maybe even then those that law enforcement arm is corruptible, so then you start seeing like bribery and intimidation happening with them, and then the gang starts spreading yet again. So yeah, hell yeah. And heck, the rogue in the party looks up at the markings on the wall, the proto graffiti that's like, uh-oh, there's a new gang here. Well, what's the name of the gang? They're known as you know the the burning spiders or something, right? But the next time they come in, they're like, oh, this is contested gangland, we better watch out. Of course that's a possibility. And again, the information that they have might be unreliable simply due to changing standards. I'm going to give you another example in just a moment. Gaming as usual says, I had a town where the party arrived. They were given control of the town because the people believed there was a curse. If anyone ruled the town for more than 2 days, they would die. Ooh, ooh. that's a thing too, right? The what is it like the the curse that happens to the people, and so things change because other people know that there's a curse in the first place, and they accept the chaos because it's much like the noble family cursed by the old hag, and the members of the noble family start dying off one by one in like very horrible and somewhat unbelievable methods or manners or something. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Heck yeah. Now, another method is elemental. Elemental chaos can bring about things that are unreliable. How many cities have we seen throughout history have burned to the ground, been swallowed up by earthquakes, destroyed by avalanches, floods, those kind of things? Heck, the um, things that we've taken for granted, like, oh, I don't know, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, built on soft ground. The Canal City of Venice is an example of that, right? At some point, Venice was dry, or at least wasn't sinking, and then over time, things have changed. And so, yes, when the PCs are come from that town, they're like, oh, this is my normal town at the bottom base of the local volcano. No big deal. Come back. They're like, what the hell happened to everybody? So elemental changes, hurricanes, tornadoes, seasonal changes, or outside vast changes. I brought up plagues and diseases. Famine is a good example. Forest fires, or uh, fires through plains due to drought, is an example. That also changes population centers. Sometimes places change due to refugees moving into town. Maybe the PCs are normally visiting one town. Maybe there are humans and gnomes and elves, and then all of a sudden it's flooded by tens of thousands of dwarves because the Five Kings mountains are starting to collapse, and the dwarven refugees are moving into town, and that starts disrupting things. And so that information, PC's not having it when they left, ends up being unreliable when someone tells them, "Oh, I heard about Five Kings Mountains collapsing, but I don't think that has anything to do with where you live." And then they get there and they're like, "Why are the dwarves in control of the town now?" Yep. Cameron's like, "That's a real simple way of summing up Pompeii." Yeah, what the hell happened? History lesson done, right? I mean, we've seen, heck, as we speak now, the various islands of Hawaii are changing and growing due to continental tectonic shifting and undersea volcanoes. So yeah, things change due to elemental problems as well. So you could very well have a town that's been wiped out due to a hurricane, or massive flooding has reduced the population to half, or what was once a political center might now be a burned out ruin because a bolt of lightning struck, I don't know, a tower peak and set it on fire, and then the fire spread because there were no, ineffectively they weren't able to put things out due to a fire brigade, and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden, the people were like, "Well, the nobles left because their tower burned down, and we're left on our own." Um, yeah, Gaming as usual says the party ended up giving the rule of the town to a cow before they left. That's throwing into the chaos. GAU also says locusts eating crops causing famine, or diseases killing off all the livestock, causing them to rot in a river that feeds this town, or even one downriver. Yeah, I mean, again, things don't necessarily even need to happen directly to one town. It could happen, upstream, downstream. It could be an outpost that is no longer getting food and supplies and information from the outside world. Like you said, if a a good, pure, clean water source is infected by the corpses of dead livestock, that's going to have a dramatic effect on the people downstream. Um, what else? Trading routes that get where an avalanche blocks a significant trading route, or high tide, low tides, right? Maybe a notable river has a lot of traffic going up and down the river, and then all of a sudden, for some reason, the waters start to recede, or they start to turn marshy, and mosquitoes start moving in. Here we go with the diseases and famine again, right? So those kind of things are really good to make your world immersive, where the player characters are relying on old information and combining it with brand new information that they're getting. Um, so we've got political upheaval. So we got political. We've got elemental. I also think social, right? Social changes. Social changes could happen through faith. Social changes can happen. I guess you could call it the equivalent of medieval viral videos, memes. So, for example, things like fashion, slang, um, food. Food is another thing that happens. People introduced to exotic foods, or uh, food sources like fruits, vegetables, meats. The first time Australians brought rabbit to Australia, or sorry, people first settlers got to Australia and they first brought rabbits, right? It's brand new. I believe, what livestock was brought to the Americas? Was it pork, pigs that were brought to the Americas? I can't remember, but anyway, also an invasive plant known as kudzu was brought here as well. Wild hogs, yep, wild hogs. our thing graffiti. Graffiti's another thing that was brought out of here. Yeah. Yep. Cameron brings up, I was going to bring that up, military, right? Militaristic. A general could be getting old information from the front lines. Yeah. I don't know if you guys have seen the latest movie known as 1917. There's a bit of a downer ending, a little bit at the very end of the movie when, I'm not going to give too much away. The two main characters that you follow through the movie 1917, filmed as a one shot, which technically wasn't, but it's as if it was filmed continuously following two main characters. They have to deliver a message to the front line. And then, one of the things is like, yeah, but by the time your message gets there, the information might already be too old, right? Gaming as usual says town criers could be paid to spread lies about stuff to cause unrest. Ooh. Yeah. Rumors start to spread. Maybe somebody, your bardic individuals, the people who are very charismatic, could start spreading gossip and rumors about a thing on purpose to create that unrest. Perception makes reality. If people think that famine is going to hit this town, people are going to react in a certain way. It's why, heck, even today, it's why we have toilet paper shortages and cleaning product shortages in stores. This is anecdotal from my own evidence, right? We get there, wife's pissed off, like, why are the shelves empty? And I'm like, well, because other people have said that other people have said that other people have said that you can't find the stuff. So what happens? There really isn't a shortage, is an artificial, again, perception makes reality, right? The country doesn't have a shortage of cleaning products. It's people creating a shortage of cleaning products because other people think that other people are creating a shortage, and then it becomes real, right? Yeah. Yeah. Gaming as usual says, yep, been DMing since '89, so tons of stories. Yeah, I'm an old grognard. I'm a 1978 gamer, so it's over 40 years or something. 43, something like that. Yeah, whatever. Um, but yep, James Lindell says 83 for me. Oh, by the way, guys, if you're unaware, as I'm responding to those who are participating, this show is TriCast over on Twitch, YouTube, and our own Discord server. So if you join the Discord server, just slide over to the left, slide on down to the bottom to the boiler room. That's where all the cool kids hang out during the show. So thank you very much. And I think I caught from you, gaming as usual, that you were hosting the channel. So I really appreciate that, unless I'm mistaken for that. Anyway, I want to touch on what Cameron is talking about, like militaristically, right? If you are running a game, thank you. If you're running a game where in your setting there's a war, it could be a cold war where there's like skirmishes. It could be all out war between, two or more nations going at it. And the PCs don't even have to be involved in the war. But again, when the unreliable information might be, oh, there's a safe haven for us on the other side of the mountain pass. They get there and it's taken over by one or more factions of a military organization, or it's been liberated by rebels, or it's been burnt out, or something of that nature. So yeah, that's also a possibility. And the people there, for example, there might be like you guys are talking about spreading, like gaming as usual says, town criers paid to spread disinformation. Maybe a reliable source of information begins lying to the player characters, which, making an insight check or something like that, the players are like, why is the blacksmith nervous? Like, I always bring my stuff to the blacksmith, and they made for me this excellent silver bladed sword that I've been using for the past 3 levels. Like, dude, are you all right? And the blacksmith's like, I can't talk to you. You need to leave, right? And like, is everything okay? No, no, town's fine. And everyone's there, and maybe everyone now has like strained smiles on their faces. So on the surface, it might look like, oh, everything's normal. But really, underneath it, it isn't. It isn't normal. Cameron says, been DMing since 2008 for me. I'm not a baby. I'm a toddler. I carry my own sippy cup. Dungeons and Dragons uh, sippy cup with like dice in it. Ice dice keeping your drink cold. Laws of Gods and Men says, this is so interesting. I'm running my first large scale war stuff, so I'm curious about military presence world building for RPGs. Ooh, we did a week of that. Ooh, did we do a week? And we can return to that. Maybe we might do that next week. James Liddell's like, they live. Yep, everything looks normal till you put the glasses on, and then you have to have a 25-minute fight in the back alley. um, but in all seriousness, though, one of the I think a war type setting in the background is awesome, but I think sometimes we get caught up in wanting to run a war game when most role playing games don't lend themselves to conducting large scale wars. But what we can learn from, because you guys know I always bring up movies and television and graphic novels and things. I think what we can learn from it is it's not a war is not necessarily about which side wins. It's about the personal story of the characters and how they interact in a place where there is a war, right? It's not who wins the war, but it's following the player character, especially if they're like low level. Because a lot of times you're like, well, if they're low level, they're not going to have much impact. And the point is, well, technically no, but if they have to get to the front line to say get a message to the front line, or take food and water supplies to people who are trapped, or become decoys to lead the enemy away so that their allies can get away, or heck, just simply running around resupplying your allies who are running out of ammo for arrows or things thrown by catapults or something. Like, just that idea, getting an important missive across enemy lines is just as important as the you know the classic hero standing on the front lines of the obnoxiously even line of of military people on horseback or something, and giving a speech that for some reason everybody can hear at the same time, but I don't know how they can hear it down at the far end but whatever. But you get the point, right? Like, it's about the characters, it's not about the war so much. Now, Gaming as Usual says they may have high. Oh, he says, yeah, I'm prepping for my session tonight. Run 7 sessions a week. Shit. Okay, run 7 sessions a week. DM. Um, Try to keep D&D going while I prep so I can get more ideas. Oh, okay. Well, pop in, steal some ideas, dude. That's what the channel's about. Anyway, he says, they may have high impact. I recently ran a war campaign where the PC went and freed POW camps and interrupting supply lines. That's more true life to war than a little bit. Supply lines, POWs, interrogations, um, um, misinformation, cutting off potential supply lines, like destroying bridges, creating problems for your enemies getting to a particular location. Heck, the weather itself. We talked about plague, famine, wintertime coming, storms, hurricanes, all that kind of stuff. Droughts have had more impact on the military than a little bit than we give it credit for. Gods of Laws and Men says, yeah, it's so interesting. D&D is not set up for large scale war scenes, but Avernus has this massive blood war going on in the background. Oh, hell yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, the what I love about the love just okay a tabletop role-playing game enthusiast love, uh, make sure my comment is colored through that lens, is that when you have a war, the randomness of what could happen during that war while the players are trying to do their thing, I think is the thing that could be embraced, which I didn't bring up in last week's talk about random encounters, right? The random, catapult ammo that's being launched overhead and might impact where the PCs are, or or the classic 300 line. We will fire enough arrows that will blot out the sun, and the Fastbender's like, yeah, then we'll have to fight in the shade, right? It's those random things happening. It's the battle of the bastards, where the PC is thrown into a world of chaos while they're trying to achieve their goals. And I love that. Yeah. Like James Lundell says, the path is cut off by an avalanche. What the hell happens then? You know, um, then if the passage is cut off by an avalanche, is it important for the PCs to is it digging out the pass? Is it getting over the the avalanche itself to get important supplies to reinvigorate the morale that's being lost by your allies or something? Who knows? Cameron says low-level players can be important and stick out with heroic deeds. They just may have to try harder. Oh, right. And like gaming as usual mentioned about having players who freed POWs. Remember the Captain America, the first Avenger movie? Well, what did he do? By himself, he went and freed POWs. That became a heroic deed, a small act in a larger war that could affect morale, and morale is huge. But remember what Captain America, Steve Rogers, had to do before then? He was selling bonds, right? Maybe not the most fun thing, but yeah, maybe collecting taxes might be a thing, or the moral implications of going to a small town and having to confiscate as much livestock and food sources that are being saved for the coming winter, but the army needs it, right? And the player characters might be stuck between a rock and a hard place. Okay, do we take the supplies of these innocent people to fortify the army, which will protect everyone, or do we not confiscate those things and suffer without food and clothing and clean water sources when the winter is about to strike and we can't press forward? Yeah, Cameron says the war becomes an environment at a certain size. Oh, hell's yes. Um, if you listen to Hardcore History, what is it, like 25, 30 hours for his Countdown to Armageddon, I believe it was called, about World War One. Oh, hell yes, hell yes. Whole landscapes were transformed by military might, and I think Dungeons and Dungeons and Dragons lends itself to that. Not much difference between fireballs and magic missiles and blasts of acid and such. Yeah. Oh no, James Lundell, becomes much more than difficult terrain if I have anything to do with it. Which, psst, by the way, I'm going to be writing a cinematic environs book about it. Shh, don't tell anybody. Um, oh yeah, traps and riddles and puzzles and all that stuff combined together. Hell's yes. um, Gaming as usual says, retired U.S. Army and history buff, so I used much of that to make the campaign. Ooh, I did not know. Well, thank you for your service, by the way. And yeah, you pull. Heck, why would you use your background your background and practical experiences to round out a world like that, right? You know, yep. POWs equals more soldiers for your side. Not only that, but there is the punch in the face that happens when you free POWs, right? It's the combination of no, thank you. The In all seriousness, but really, like, something that is very hard to replicate in role playing games is the punch in the face that politically and even socially each side of a war gets when one side or the other achieves a success or even has a failure that is small but recognizable, right? If if the player character is low level, minor in the whole scope of a big giant war, frees very important POWs, or they free them from the from a location that is like underneath the noses of the nobles, or on an island that's surrounded by the toughest and the most skilled soldiers available, or um, uh, uh, the local enemy has given a sent the town criers out that we will win the war. We just need your help to win the war. We've got them on the run, and then the player characters show up and they're like, no, sometimes that punch in the face hurts more than the actual act of doing a thing, right? Um, uh, a lot of times, the weaker side engages in activities for the sole purpose of punching the other side in the face rather than trying to win the war militaristically, right? It's about spreading disinformation. It's why terrorism exists in the first place. When you don't have certain resources, you resort to using other resources. And those resources could be pretty damn horrible, like, oh, I don't know, scattering the dead bodies of your enemies out, posting them up for the world to see, or having mock trials in open courtyards for people to see what the heck's going on, or um, returning the severed limbs of your enemies to your back to your enemies as a message or something of that nature, right? It's that kind of thing. It's pretty horrible what the weaker side could be forced to do. But on the other hand, when you start ripping down symbols of power, destroying a major capital city, or a wizard's tower that has represented the Council of Seven for 12 generations, and now it falls down, that can send more of a message than actually destroying the wizards in the first place, right? So yeah, Cameron. I'll get back to you guys in the chat here. Cameron says mines, barbed wire, walls, of course, trenches, and mind you, all of those have even like little subsets to them: trenches, ditches, foxholes, blasted landscapes full of buried duds that could go off any second, and dangerous deserters. Gnomish war could leave all that behind, and more. How about uh, okay, those trenches could be filled with um, soldiers who are panicked. Maybe they're trying to leave. Those trenches could be filled with mud and water. It could be filled with acid, flammable liquids like oil. Who knows what's down in there? When it comes to landmines could be like glyphs left in the dirt, and if you just move the dirt just a little bit, you're standing on one of those explosive glyphs or something. Barbed wire could be anything from actual wire that's barbed. It could be like assassin plants that have been planted for the sole purpose of keeping people back. They could be spells that have been left there. So like a web spell could shoot out from the ground, or something of that nature. Ditches and foxholes. The simple act of climbing into a tight space. By the way, fifth edition has rules for tight spaces. I believe it's um, disadvantage on your attack rolls and all attacks. Disadvantage on your attack rolls, disadvantage on your dex saving throws, and all attacks have advantage against you if you go into a tight space. I dare you, plate mail armored paladin, to climb into a foxhole, not knowing how deep you're going to have to crawl on your hands and knees, or worse, slide on your belly to try to get to a particular location with an enemy inside, right? I mean, who knows, right? And then, like you said, dangerous deserters. Heck, a a soldier who's been hurt, who's screaming in pain, but you're trying to use stealth to sneak around, but this soldier is screaming in pain and looks at you and is like, help me, please, help me, help me. Do you kill that soldiers or try to suffocate them and hold their mouth to keep your enemy from coming after you? I mean, there's a lot of moral implications on that too. Um, yeah, child soldiers. Oh my God. Gaming as usual says I had small units of the enemy force change sides because of players' actions and sometimes give them information. Yep, yep. Who's to say that the people you the classic enemy hordes of orcs are like, look, listen, I don't even want to be part of this military thing. I just want to get the hell out of here. All I want to do is roam the countryside as a nomad, and they force me into this battle. Damn evil liches. They're always doing that to us, right? Um, yeah. Uh, Laws of Gods and Men says, I thought about bringing a previous edition's mechanic for large scale combats. Essentially, all characters know the goals of the situation. I ask their plan, then have them make multiple skill checks before the combat to determine their success in the combat, which I think is absolutely perfect concept. Goes on to say, where the players know the goal and need to go from point A to Z, then narrate the overall scenes and how they fared on the skill checks, right? And mind you, you could have stacked skill checks, like you need 3 successes in order to achieve your goal, and you start having these measured successes and failures, right? You could do that as well. He says, but I'm also looking into the mass combat, unearthed arcana info, and mob combat rules in the DMG, which it's funny how much the Dungeon Master's Guide has in it that a lot of us have ignored over the years, including me. But yeah, there is mass mob combat rules in there. Laws of Gods and Men says, if anyone has advice or other resources, let me know. By the way, if you join the Discord, you can actually pop in, unlike YouTube or Twitch, you can pop in like links to articles, photographs, pictures, artwork, stuff like that as well. Yeah, like James Lindell says, Warforged leftovers. Heck, I always like the idea of reskinning a dragon turtle as like a gnomish or dwarven war machine or something. Those Warforged, or what are they called? Constructs. Sheesh, where did my mind go? Lurker says, idea. Adventure rooms come across us. The adventurers come across a small village that is being held by a unit from war that is going on. The thing is, they don't know. Oh, they don't know war. Thing is, they don't know if the war has been over for at least a year, and this one unit is just leaving as as warlords, living as warlords until the adventurers bring them news from the outside. Then all hell breaks loose. You know what? That actually happens more than a little bit. As a personal context, the holiday known as Juneteenth has a lot to do with that. When slaves were freed, it took 2 years for that information to extend all the way, I think, into Western Texas, for that information to be disseminated. In war, yeah, when you have a lack of communication, and communication is key, when you have a lack of that, yeah, you're there are many times where there have been people who have been living on islands who still thought the war was still going on, weeks, months, years later. And mind you, when you tell someone that the war's over, that might cause some like psychological harm, especially if you've built your entire world around defending a certain place or trying to achieve a certain goal or waiting for the enemy waiting for your allies to arrive. I mean, can you imagine how, while they didn't go into it, could you imagine how Steve Rogers, Captain America, felt when people were driving around in, Volkswagens, BMWs, Mercedes Benz? Sorry to say that, but hey, if you lived in a moment when literally it was the right and just war, and then you come back to the United States and people were like, oh, this is a symbol of power and success. Driving it up to the capital of the United States, I'm driving in my BMW, right? Yeah, we don't think about it that way, but the people in a particular period of time, yep. Like Gaming as Usual says, yeah, Japanese squad held an island from World War II to the 2000s, thinking the war was going on. It required his old commander to come and tell him to stand down. I do remember that story. Yep, and like James Lindell says, wasn't that in a Star Trek Next Gen episode with the Klingons not knowing the war was over? Yeah, yeah, and what a that also might leave the players in a position, another moral quandary, right? They have an enemy, air quotes enemy, that wants to stop them because the war's still going on, and the players are like, no, the war's over, we don't want to hurt you. I know you're our enemy, but the war's over, we're friends now. And the orcs are like, no, we're not. Like, yes. Yeah. Oh man, Game as Usual says, and if you don't use explosive glyphs. uh yeah, glyphs of warding and stuff. Oh my, you could very much mimic a war with you could very much mimic a war by using Dungeons and Dragons as the equivalents of many of the aspects of, like, the things of World War One. Side note: we know that World War One brought upon a cacophony, a literal cornucopia of technological advancement, which actually made the war worse because, as described by hardcore history, Dan Carlin, it allowed countries to take a punch that they normally couldn't. And I think that's where, like, clerical and paladin and druidic healing comes in, right? A bunch of soldiers being healed and put back on the field when they're just like, I don't want to go back out there. And they're like, here's another bless spell. No! Medical advancement. Hell yeah. There was a ton of advancement during World War One. And I think I've heard told upwards of 60 million people died. And twice as many suffered irreparable harm. Yep, and World War One made World War Two so much worse. Yeah, yeah. Now, mind you, I'm an armchair historian, so I don't know the details of that, but yeah. But anyway, guys, we've gone a little bit too long. Got to head off to work, so thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for the new people, James Lindell. Thank you for popping on in. I'm always here. Everyone else. Rickard, Gaming as Usual, Cam, everybody, Tesla popping in at, like, the year of the Six Emperors, about that upheaval where, emperor, a new person coming in, one after another, all these things they're not lies, but they are unreliable information. And I think if done correctly, without doing a gotcha, with leaving information open to the players and letting them be the experts that they are, they can have some fun with it and try to piece together the information that they are getting, even though they know that it is unreliable. So anyway, tomorrow is Third Pillar Thursday, the third pillar of exploration. You guys know that's one of my favorites. It has everything to do with the cinematic environs that are listed next to me, beside me. The one below is Wetlands, we just released. The one above is for Call of Cthulhu, which is survival. Just check myself and the rest of us out. Critical Hit Publishing over at Drive Through RPG. But anyway, guys, everyone have a great one. I will see you tomorrow. Have a great day, guys. Bye. Thank you very much for watching.